Captain John Rackham and his crew. John Rackham was quartermaster to Vane's company till Vane was turned out for not fighting the French man-of-war, and Rackham put in captain in his place, which happened about the 24th day of November, 1718. His first cruise was among the Caribbee Islands, where he took and plundered several vessels. Afterward, to the windward of Jamaica, he fell in with a Madeira man, which he detained till he had made his market out of her, and then restored her to her master, suffering Jose Tisdell, a tavern keeper at Jamaica, whom he had taken among his prizes, to go aboard her, she being bound for that island. Afterwards he sailed towards the island Bermuda, where he took a ship bound to England from Carolina, and a small ship from New England, both which he carried to the Bahama Islands, and there claimed. But, staying too long in that neighborhood, Captain Rogers sent out a sloop well manned, which retook both the prizes, the pirate making his escape. From hence they proceeded to the back of Cuba, where Rackham stayed a long time with his Delilahs, till their provision was consumed, when he concluded it time to look out for more. As he was putting to sea, a Guarda del Costa came in with a small English sloop, which he had taken as an interloper on that coast. The Spaniard, seeing the pirate, attacked her, but finding he could not come to her that night because she lay close behind a little island, he warps into the channel to make sure of her in the morning. Upon this, Rackham took his crew into the boat with their pistols and cutlasses, and falls aboard the Spaniards in the night without being discovered, telling them if they spoke a word they were dead men, and so shipping their cables drove out to sea, commanding them to take the boat and go aboard their sloop immediately, or else they were all dead men. Afterwards, they waking the captain and his men in the hammocks, who rose full of their expectation of the prizes, they sent them aboard their empty sloop. In the beginning of September they went off the fresh part of Hispaniola, where they took 2 or 3 Frenchmen on board that were looking after some cattle grazing near the waterside. Then plundered 2 sloops. They returned to Jamaica, where they took a schooner. Rackham, continuing about this island longer than a man of his business ought to have done, gave time to a canoe, which he had surprised in Ocho Bay, to inform the governor of Jamaica of his civilities to all he met with going or coming from this island. Thereupon a sloop was sent out in quest of him, well manned and armed, under Captain Barnett, to repay him for all his good-natured actions, and, if possible, to bring him to the island. In the meantime, Rackham met with the Negril Point, a small petty auger, which, upon sight of him, ran ashore and landed her men. But Rackham, hailing them, desired the petty auger's men to come aboard him and drink a bowl of punch, swearing they were all friends and would do no harm. Hereupon they agreed to his request and went aboard him, though it proved fatal to every one of them, they being 9 in all. For they were no sooner got aboard and had laid down their muskets and cutlasses in order to take up their pipes and make themselves merry with their new acquaintances over a can of flip, but Captain Barnett's sloop was in sight, which soon put a damp to all their merriment. Finding she stood directly toward them, they immediately weighed their anchor and stood off. Barnett gave them chase, and having the advantage of the wind, soon came upon her, gave her a broadside or 2, and, after a very small dispute, took her and his 9 new guests, and brought them all together into Port Royal in Jamaica, in about a fortnight's time. November the 10th, 1720, a court of admiralty was held at St. Jago de la Vega, where the following persons were tried and convicted of piracy, and accordingly sentence of death was passed upon them by the governor, viz. John Rackham, captain; George Featherstone, master; Richard Corner, quartermaster; John Davis, John Howell, Patrick Carty, Thomas Earl, James Dobbin, and Noah Harwood, 5 of whom was hanged the next day at Gallows Point, and the rest the day after. The 3 first were taken and hanged in chains, Rackham at Plum Point, Featherstone at Bush Key, and Corner at Gun Key. But what was yet more strange was the conviction of the 9 guests, that knew nothing of the matter, or at least they pretended so, but the people would not believe them, because it was proved that they came on board with pistols and cutlasses. However, they were so much favored as to have the court adjourned to the 24th of January following, to give a better account of themselves than at the time appeared to the court. Beside, the jury also then wanted sufficient evidence to prove the piratical intention of going aboard the said sloops. The 2 Frenchmen taken by Rackham from the island of Hispaniola deposed that John Eaton, Edward Warner, Thomas Baker, Thomas Quick, John Cole, Benjamin Palmer, Walter Roos, John Hanson, and John Howard came on board the pirate sloop at Negril Point in Jamaica. Indeed, they owned that the first sight of them they run away from Rackham's sloop, but that he hailing them, they returned, and Rackham sent his canoe ashore to fetch them aboard him, when they saw them all armed with guns and cutlasses, which they brought with them, and that when they were chased by Captain Barnett, they were frank and free, some drinking and walking about the deck not at all dispirited, during which time there was a great gun and small arms fired by the pirate sloop at Captain Barnett's sloop, but that they could not say that the prisoners were any way concerned in it. However, they were certain that when Captain Barnett's sloop fired at Rackham's, the prisoners at the bar went under deck for cowardice, as they supposed, not so much as once peeping up during the time of the whole action. But when Captain Barnett drew nigh to them to board them, all of them came up and helped to row the sloop in order to escape from him. And that Rackham's men and they seemed to agree very well together, and that they did verily believe they were all of a party, having heard them say, when they came on board, they liked them never the worse for being pirates, since they were all honest boys and loved their bottles. To which the prisoners answered in their own defence that they were a great way off from friends and acquaintances, and therefore it was impossible to have any one to give account of them, that they were very honest, painstaking men, and came out to go a-turtling to provide for their families. Accordingly, going ashore at Negril Point, they saw a sloop, with a white pendant, making toward them, whereupon they took up their arms, which were no other but what all people carry upon such occasions, and ran into the woods to hide themselves among the bushes, not knowing what she might be. But when they hailed them and told them they were Englishmen, they ventured out and came aboard them, as they desired, to drink a bowl of punch, they being poor men who get their livelihood very heartily, and such a thing was very acceptable to them. But when they came on board the sloop, to their very great surprise, they found they were pirates, upon which they begged to be released. But Rackham swore that if they did not stay and assist them against that sloop that was coming down against them, he would cut all their throats. So being compelled thereunto by Rackham and his men to save their lives, they did assist him, and with no other design but to prevent their being cut in pieces. But as soon as Captain Barnett came up with them, they all very readily and willingly submitted. This being all they had to say in their own defence, the prisoners were ordered from the bar. The court were divided in their judgments, but the majority were of the opinion that they were all guilty of the piracy and felony they were charged with. Thereupon they all received sentence of death, as usual in such cases, the judge making a very pathetic speech to them, exhorting them to bear their sufferings patiently, assuring them that if they were innocent, which he very much doubted, then their reward would be greater in the other world. But everybody must own their case was very hard in this. February 17th, John Eaton, Thomas Quick, and Thomas Baker were accordingly executed at Gallows Point, and the next day John Cole, John Howard, and Benjamin Palmer underwent the same fate at Kingston. The other 3 got a reprieve, they being against going aboard the pirate sloop, and are now living.